Hello everyone! Today I'm talking about sequins, a wonderful sparkly invention that makes everything more beautiful and time-consuming to make. I'll be explaining what they are and how to sew them on. These are the samplers I'll be featuring in this tutorial, but I've used the same techniques on a whole bunch of projects to get a variety of effects. If you aren't familiar with them, sequins are small, usually disc-shaped pieces of plastic with a hole in the center. The discs can be faceted or smooth and come in all sorts of colors and sizes. They come in different shapes too, but discs are the most common. The technique I'm using in this video would work for small square or triangular ones too. However, it won't work for large ones in silly shapes like these leaves. Sequins are meant to be sewn on, that's why they have a hole in the center. If you find thin plastic discs without a hole, these are pallets and intended to be glued on. And these guys are rhinestones. They are made from acrylic and much thicker than sequins. These have flat backs and no hole, so they are also meant to be glued on. I'm using two different types of sequins in this video. The gold ones are flat and 4 millimeters wide, and the gray ones are 6 millimeters wide and faceted. For this first sample, I'm using the gray sequins, and I'll be showing how to sew them in a line. My sample is made from wool, with a strip of ribbon serving as a guide for the line, but sequins can be sewn onto any material. Start by knotting the thread, then bring the needle through the fabric so the knot is on the underside. Thread the sequin onto the needle, then bring the needle through the fabric to secure one side of the sequin down. The needle should come through the fabric just past the opposite side of the sequin. Then bring the needle back through the center of the sequin. You need thread going through both sides of the sequin to keep it down, otherwise it'll flare up. I know it's a circle and circles don't really have sides, but hopefully you know what I mean. Bring the needle back up just past the edge of the sequin. Then pick another one up and bring the needle back down through the fabric where you want the center of the sequin to sit. And the needle should end up on the other side of that sequin. Then bring it back down through the center. And that's the basic sequin stitch, or at least the one that I use. I think all beading sounds confusing when explaining it, and this is no exception, but it's a very natural movement when you attempt it, and when you get better at it, a single sequin can be sewn on with two motions. For this sampler, I'm making sure all my stitches and sequins are straight along the edge of the bias tape, and I'm doing this by making sure that every time the needle goes through the fabric, it's aligned with the edge. And remember that this is just an example. The same technique can be used to sew sequins on in a curved line or into a design. Method number 2 for sewing sequins on is using a bead to secure them. This is done by bringing a sequin down the thread so it sits against the fabric. Then pick up a bead and bring the needle through the center of the sequin. As long as the bead is larger than the hole in the sequin, it'll keep the sequin in place. The needle should come back up through the fabric where you want the center of the next sequin to sit, and the process repeats. Though this isn't difficult to do, I find it makes the thread way more prone to tangling, and it's challenging to get the sequin exactly where you want it to be. The process ends up being slower than sewing them on normally. So slow, in fact, that when I want this effect, I usually sew the sequins on normally, then go back through and stitch beads into the centers. Now that you know how to sew a sequin on, I'm going to show you the process I use for embellishing appliques with them. I start out with a basic applique basted in place. I bring the needle through the fabric near the edge and begin sewing smaller sequins around the edge. Instead of sewing a single row of sequins around the applique, I overlap them and sew some outward from the edges to create a really dense, blocky line. This helps cover the mesh around the applique and adds a lot of sparkle. Though the process is a bit time-consuming, it can really transform the lace and make it look a lot more expensive. I used this technique on an 18th century riding coat I made last year. It took forever, but the end result was so pretty that I didn't care, and it was actually pretty relaxing to do. For this method, I think smaller sequins work best. Anything over 5 millimeters will probably look a little bit out of place, but it does depend on the size of the applique. Just in general, I think smaller sequins look better, since you see the color and the reflection that makes them look sparkly, but not a big hunk of plastic. Of course, it depends on the sheen the sequins have and the shape, along with personal preference. I finished embellishing this off screen since I didn't want to bore you, and here's the finished sampler. I hope that this video was helpful and that you learned about working with sequins. Please keep in mind that after you know how to sew a sequin on, you can sew them in any design or pattern you like, or even in a gentle spattering across a whole garment. The options are unlimited. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and I shall talk to you all very soon.